Start the video, roll that footage, and I'll talk into the mic. That doesn't work for here. But y'all don't need to hear me. This is for the live stream. We live stream. It's pretty cool. Oh, I can turn off the music. That's right. There we go. That wonderful sound system of the projector. Okay, I'm going to start off by calling out the new folks. Who are our new folks here tonight? First timers. Awesome. Welcome. Glad to have you all here. Glad you're able to find the location. Feel free to grab drinks. There's root beer and there's regular beer. And the root beer is in the glasses, the regular beer is in the cans, because it's classy that way. And then we've got pizza as well. Please do grab some pizza. If you need some ice, there's a fridge back there that may or may not have ice. And then restrooms are around the corner back there if you need a restroom. So welcome. Glad to have you all here. I was going to say please meet others while you're here, but I think you all have done a great job with that. So tonight we've got Eric giving a presentation on unit testing in JavaScript, which is a really cool topic. He graciously accepted giving a talk after I notified him on Monday. Said, hey, you want to give a talk on this? He's like, yeah, okay. So that's very nice of him. If anybody else wants to give talks, please do reach out to me on Twitter or on the meetup page or anything like that. Let's see, what else? Let's talk sponsors. Pizza tonight is provided by Tech Systems. They are a local recruiting agency. Is that a good way? Okay. And they've graciously sponsored our food for several months now. So it's been really nice because, we like food. And yeah. And then we also have Geekdom sponsors the location. So this is the Geekdom place. This is their event center. They've got a card over there, I think, if you are interested in what Geekdom does. They're kind of a co-working place. Pretty cool stuff. They've got lots of events going on. And then Envision and Strat Medical, they also do some financial things to help pay for some of the miscellaneous stuff with running the event. So that's their sponsors. If anybody wants to sponsor, if their company wants to sponsor Rackspace, they could definitely help out. Taco Tuesday is going to be at Blanco Cafe, like 2 blocks down on Tuesday. This coming Tuesday, so please join that. I'm not going to be there, but that's okay. It probably is better because of that. But yeah, it's on the meetup page, so if you want to go to that, that's just at lunchtime, people meet. Let's see, CSS DevConf is coming to town. I've mentioned this many times. I may be able to get you a discount code if they send me one, but that'll be here in October. They've got some workshops as well for that, and if you want to volunteer, you can get in for free. So that's actually a great opportunity to volunteer at a really good conference. It's a 2-day conference, and then they do workshops on the 3rd day. We're going to team up with them, I think, on Tuesday night to do a combined meetup. It's going to be a Dribbble meetup. So we'll be meeting with those guys. And then there's Front Porch Conf coming up in Dallas. They just had their Austin one. I have no idea how it went. I'm sure it went great because it's great. And then after the presentation, we're going to do games if you want to, or you can just stick around for conversation. We'll probably move to the back room because there's tables there and chairs. So that's all I have for announcements. Think about if you want to announce something yourself while I show you Chai. No, I'm working on something that I figure is worth mentioning. This idea of front-end testing and all the little tenets of front-end testing. So unit testing, hey, we're going over that tonight. Integration testing, performance testing, JavaScript testing, CSS testing, linting, browser testing, all this kind of stuff. So basically, I want to kind of create a community around front-end testing. If you are interested, there's a Twitter account that I set up that you can follow along with. And every day or so, I'll put a front-end testing resource out there. And I'm actually giving away a ticket to CSS Summit, which is coming up next week. So if you retweet this, if you're on Twitter and you retweet this, tonight I'm going to pick one person. What was that?
Where is it?
CSS Summit online. And then this is Twitter/front-end testing. So anyway, I've just been working on this in my spare time whenever I can find time, but I wanted to mention it in case anybody else is interested. I'll probably also try and do a email newsletter thing as well. So yeah, if you're interested in that, jump on in. Happy to have any sort of, help if you have any articles you want to send along my way. Okay, that's me. What about y'all? Who has anything worth mentioning, a project they're working on or a job that they're looking for or looking to hire for? We'll sit here awkwardly until somebody has something. Yes.
I'm new. I'm
Awesome.
Corey Gonzalez. I work for AT&T right now as a software developer. I'm actually quitting.
Oh, congratulations.
So it might be looking for someone.
Okay,
So
nice.
if anyone wants to ask me information about that, a lot of people on my team have been dropping off, doing other things. So there's a couple openings there. If anyone's looking for a software developer position. Why are you quitting? I'm taking a position with the Department of Defense. So doing crazy secret stuff that no one can know about.
Don't ask him. You know how that goes. Cool. Yes.
My name is Rodney Kidd. We are launching an app called Safety Kick. We've actually already launched, but we're really spent a couple years proving it out. And we have a patent pending form builder. We've removed all the documents in the field, put them in real-time digital form for iOS only. And safety and compliance is where we're launching, and then we're going to move into medical and legal.
Have fun with that. HIPAA laws, the best.
Safety and compliance.
Yeah.
We're launching.
Yeah. That's actually, there's a lot of people who stay away from that, myself, namely just because it's hairy. So yeah, cool. Who else out there?
I'm just kind of here to see what's going on, and I have an interest in Java development. I have an idea teaching English overseas that I'd like to develop, and just kind of trying to. I have to pay the bills and all that, so just trying to. I've been trying to learn on my own, and it's quite difficult to go beyond the book. But I found some good books at least.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Well.
Japan, Sonoma Osaka, Western Japan.
My coworker was talking about learning some Japanese. Yeah, crazy, small world. Who else? Okay, that's enough awkward silence. Okay, so we're gonna get Eric up here. In the meantime, please do grab some drinks, and I have a bottle opener. How are y'all opening your bottles? If you have. Oh, it's a screw top. Okay, good. While Eric gets set up, grab some pizza, grab some drinks, go to the bathroom, something like that. I brought my webcam if you want it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Require anything installed. I think if you use QuickTime, you can record it. And one thing is, make sure you save before you disconnect, because I lost a whole presentation once because I disconnected and it didn't save. Like it said there was an error.
Yeah, I don't know. I probably won't. Yeah.
It's plugged in if you want
I
to.
won't bother with
You
it.
can just, especially if you are mirroring.
Cool.
And then I'll just let you start whenever you want to start.
If you don't mind hooking up the microphone when you start, and also if there's any questions, could you repeat the questions so it gets recorded?
I will give it my best shot. Let's see. Lizard poison spot. Good evening. My name is Eric Caraway, and as Kevin said, 2 nights ago, he hit me up on Twitter and asked if I wanted to present. And I don't really even know how to use Twitter. I've not been a developer for very long, and I come from a community where everybody's on Facebook. So still trying to figure out the Twitter thing. But yeah. So I put this together just a couple days, so be gentle. So some questions that we're going to answer tonight. Who does unit testing? What is unit testing? When should I use unit testing? Why do developers use unit testing? And how do I get started? So by a show of hands, who does any sort of unit testing in their day-to-day work? All right. Great. Just curious about that. So we're going to learn a little bit about Mocha, which is a JavaScript test framework that runs on Node. We're going to learn about the Chai assertion library, which makes testing a little bit easier to work with, allows you to write tests that read like English. There's different assertion styles, kind of like an older, I don't know, you may call it like a TDD approach, just to use this, assert equal sort of language that doesn't really read like an English sentence. So Chai offers some other options, so you can say things like, foo should be a string, or expect foo to be a string. So we'll talk a little bit about Chai. But to get started, let's talk about my programming background. It's a little untraditional. My first exposure to programming was in 1995 in a high school computer science class doing Borland Turbo Pascal. And then I was really excited about it in high school, but then had this 12-year gap where got really focused on music, got a music scholarship for college, so went to school for music, got a master's degree in music, and then taught high school band for 10 years. And after doing that for a while, got married and thought, I'd like to kind of pursue this programming interest that I had in high school. That was kind of based on some music visualizations and some educational software stuff that I was interested in. So through some self-study and going to a coding boot camp a couple years ago, I career transitioned from public school teaching to being a software developer. How many people here are part of any sort of boot camp ecosystem? Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's a great, it's so exciting to see that model that's only really been around for a couple years that enables people that maybe have a background in another industry to transition to a totally different career without necessarily having to go and put 4 years into another college degree, which I was not interested in doing because I'm still paying off a master's in music. So, oh yeah, this is Turbo Pascal, 1995. And this is Coder Camps, the boot camp that I went to, based in Houston. It's a .NET focused boot camp, so we studied JavaScript and .NET. And my first job out of the boot camp was working in the .NET stack, but I don't do that anymore. I'm a front-end developer. So I'm over at Rackspace right now as a contractor, and I've been there for about 14 months. So as I was learning to code, doing this kind of self-study, figuring it out on my own before going to the boot camp, looking back on it, I kind of come up with this analogy for what worked for me. And this idea of a three-legged stool. So the first leg of the stool is doing tutorials, which are step-by-step, very guided, very explicit. This is what you need to learn. This is what you need to learn next. Codecademy I went through all of Codecademy's free, awesome courseware. I think it's great. Step-by-step books are really good about that. Not necessarily reference books, but tutorial-style books that will take you through learning to code step-by-step. And then the other thing that maybe the second leg of the stool that really got me interested was doing these algorithm challenges, which are less guided. They're less tell you exactly what to do. They're a lot more figure out this logic puzzle. And I worked on those a lot, and that kind of, got me more motivated. It was the other leg of the stool. And the third is doing projects, and that kind of exercised the muscle of ideation and creativity. So if you have an idea for an app or something that you want to do and to bring programming into like maybe another interest you have, that's kind of where projects tie in. So I kind of think, as I was learning to code, like keeping those three things in balance. As I had more ideas for projects, I needed to go do more tutorials. As I got to more difficult algorithm challenges, I needed to go like learn other things about languages. And so that's what worked for me. It's just kind of an idea that I have about an approach that works to kind of learn to code if you're on your own and doing some self-study. So tutorials, which are very guided, algorithm challenges, which are fast feedback and kind of let you learn that way, and then projects where you like come up with an idea and just try to like figure it out as you go. So how does this relate to unit testing? CodingBat is a site that I used. It's put together by this guy, Nick Parlante. He has a lot of free videos online. He, like instructor at Stanford, worked at Google, really, really into programming education. So his website gives you this super fast feedback. And let me go ahead and just kind of hop over to CodingBat. So I've kind of done all the Python ones and some of the Java ones. And the cool thing about it is it kind of gives you this, report of, like which one is this? Oh, this one gave me like, a lot of trouble, failing tests until I eventually got it. But yeah, and it kind of keeps track of like, like this dates back to 2013 or so. So like CodingBat, I think it's a great website. It's not as flashy as some of the other ones, like CoderByte's a good one. There's like these other Code Kata sites, but that worked for me. And the cool thing about it is it like is this unit testing based approach where you can kind of see what passes, what fails. So they give you these logic puzzles. You kind of work out a solution, and then once you kind of get something that works, then you have the confidence to maybe refactor it into something that's a little more elegant, maybe is shorter, and because it has like this unit testing based approach with instant feedback. So one of my favorite challenges from this website is like, we want to make a package of Goal kilos of chocolate. We have small bars that are 1 kilo each, big bars 5 kilos each, and return the number of small bars to use, assuming that we always use big bars before small bars, and return -1 if it can't be done. So this is like one of the more challenging algorithm challenges. You may see like something like this kind of in an interview, but it's kind of beside the point because I think these are just fun puzzles to challenge yourself with. And so, like I said, the CodingBat website is all done in Python and JavaScript, Python and Java. And I kind of put together a project where I wanted to convert them to JavaScript. There are other websites that have these problems in JavaScript and Ruby, but I was just like, I don't know, so impressed by the CodingBat site that I wanted to convert them to JavaScript. So I have a repo up on GitHub. So how does this relate to testing? Because that's what you guys are here for tonight. And algorithm challenges are generally based on like pure functions. And pure functions are a great introduction to unit testing because they're tests that are only concerned with the input and the output of a function. So all of the other things about testing that are often barriers to getting into it, like dependency injection, worrying about global state, like asynchronous behavior, putting up some complicated mock data setup, or browser automation, you don't have to worry about that at all if you're just testing like really, really simple, pure functions, kind of in the style of these algorithm challenges. So that's how these algorithm challenges kind of relate to, or at least how like that kind of got me into the idea of unit testing, pure functions. So this is an example from the chocolate thing I just mentioned. And you can see here on the right, like the example of if you're in the browser, so there is zero setup involved on coding that. Gives you instant feedback. And so you can see that, how does he have it set up? Like the three arguments are going to be like number of small bars, number of big bars, and the target. And you include like the expectation and then what you actually get. So if you're passing in, 4 small bars, 1 big bar, which is 5, and your target is 9, then you expect that you're going to use 4 small bars. So, the way that maybe the function is set up right now, it passes that test because you get 4, it says OK, and it's green. It's instant feedback. It's really good for learning. But you can see on the 4th one, it was expecting to get 2, and it actually got -3, so that test failed. So that is an example of that. Does anybody have any questions up to this point? Cool. All right. So this is an example of kind of that problem converted into a plunker and done in JavaScript with QUnit. And we're going to talk about Mocha and Chai. But first, we'll do kind of a live demo with QUnit. I don't work in QUnit day to day, but when I was first getting started with this, I liked it because it was just really, really easy to get set up. And at the time, I didn't really know how to use the command line at all. Certainly didn't know anything about Node. But I could work with like flat files and run stuff in a browser, and that's really all that QUnit takes. I know that you can do Mocha and like its reporter in a browser, but I didn't know how to do that. So at the time, I was just experimenting with QUnit, and let's have a look. Oh. All right, so Plunker's awesome because you can just, again, get instant feedback. So, and here we have our tests, and this is kind of a solution to this algorithm challenge that's maybe not as elegant as it could be. I'm sure I could make that much shorter, but it's readable. So let's, we can take stuff out and just kind of see what happens. And we get this, a failing test where it shows us we expected -1 in this case of passing in 1, 2, and 7. But what we actually got was 2. So again, going back to the idea of expected, actual, showing you a diff, and it's really, really beneficial in this learning process. You can see another example, and another failing test, several failing tests. I'll do another one. Yeah, this breaks a lot of tests. So again, it's maybe not an elegant solution, but I took this algorithm challenge and he said, return -1 if it can't be done. And before we go on too much, let's review the actual language for this because I want to make sure we get it right. All right, and all right. So again, we want to make a package of goal kilos of chocolate. We have a number of small bars that are 1 kilo each, big bars that are 5 kilos each, and return the number of small bars to use. Assuming that we're going to always use the big bars first, the ones that are 5 kilos each, and return -1 if it can't be done. And so here he kind of sets you up with, goal is the last parameter. First is number of small bars, number of big bars, and if we run it, we see that all the tests pass. And I kind of have this weird language of, I don't know, composite fives. Again, I was just like trying to figure this out on my own without much, oh shoot. So I'm sure this can be kind of refactored. But if you are, yeah, kind of like working on your own, just trying to figure stuff out, this is a great way to get feedback, you know? And so then I would be like, oh, let me figure out why this isn't working. And it's this, again, a unit test based approach. So that is,
So that is how you would dive into learning concepts in JavaScript?
yeah, I think so.
Build the unit tests around them and tweak things and watch them fail and say,
Yeah, yeah, like a lot of experimentation. Yeah. So like going back to the three-legged stool, tutorials are great for giving you this like step by step by step, handing it to you. And that kind of gets you to a certain point. And then these kind of algorithm challenges work, you know, like puzzles and maybe exercise a different muscle. And the third part of that, the projects, are kind of like coming up with ideas on your own and just trying to make something. Yeah, like I think I mean, again, I came from a different background, but the thing that really interests me in programming is like making stuff, you know, and having ideas and yeah. So this is like a solution in JavaScript, running on Plunker, in the browser, minimal setup, QUnit running here, and all QUnit, like just, you have this like fixture set up with a really basic HTML file. This is straight copied out of their documentation. So that is one way to get set up.
So did you learn QUnit at the same time you were learning JavaScript?
No, I would say like I don't really know that I know it. Like I don't really know QUnit. Like I don't really use it. I just kind of looked at their documentation and kind of like try to figure some stuff out. So yeah. Thank you for the question. Does anybody else have any questions? All right. So this is an idea of, you know, it's not Mocha and Chai, but from a pragmatic sense, maybe not the best tool, but it is something that you can get set up really quickly. So that's QUnit, but I don't use that day to day. Let me find, okay. So, yeah, and we looked at this just kind of like, you know, kind of thinking through the algorithm challenge, thinking of, you know, if we don't have enough small bars, return -1. If the number of bars is like more than our total bars that we have, you know, return -1. And this is maybe like kind of ugly and can be refactored. I think it's readable. But having that unit test-based approach where you have your harness of tests gives you a lot more freedom and confidence to kind of experiment with things. So a quick review. We asked, you know, who does some unit testing? About a third to half of the room. What is unit testing? It's this way of, you know, testing your code, making sure that stuff, you know, when you make changes to it, it doesn't break. You can write test first, meaning like you get requirements, you have an idea of what a function should do, so you set up like a harness of tests, and then you just start writing your code, and then when the tests pass, then you have the confidence that your code works. And from there, you can go on to refactor, go on to make it better, kind of maximize it and make it more elegant, more readable, more performant. When do you use unit testing? Ideally, you would write your tests first, although it's pretty common to like write something, get it working, then write tests for it so that, you know, kind of more of a regression sense that when you make changes, it's not going to break. And then why do we do it? Makes the code more maintainable, gives you the confidence that when you make changes, stuff's not breaking. because manual testing is really expensive. That's another reason why. And how do we do it? We can use different frameworks like Mocha and Chai, or if you're looking for something that's really easy to get set up and run in a browser, you can use QUnit. We talked about a three-legged stool analogy for learning to code that involves step-by-step tutorials, projects to kind of work on ideation and creativity. And the third component of that for me is algorithm challenges, which relate to testing in that you have like this test-driven approach of, for pure functions, inputs, outputs, expected responses. So moving on to the next part of the presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about Mocha and Chai. I'm going to look at something called rock, paper, scissors, rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, and maybe test the live coding gods and see what happens. Before I go on, does anybody have any questions? Anyone? No? All right. So this is kind of a preview of what we will hopefully work towards, assuming everything goes well, for rock, paper, scissors. So rock, paper, scissors is a common algorithm challenge, one that's often given in job interviews. You can see in the upper left-hand corner, just a function with a solution. Again, it's maybe not one that's all that elegant. There are probably better ways to solve this problem, but it works because the test passed. So from there, I feel like the confidence to go on and refactor. On the bottom left, we have a terminal where we'll run the tests. And on the right side, we have our test file. You'll notice the file names, rock, paper, scissors, JS, and rock, paper, scissors.spec.js. There's a lot of ways that you can set up file structure, file naming conventions. One that I really like is keeping kind of files as modules and tests for that file right up next to it in the same subfolder, just with a .spec suffix. I think it's a great way to keep code organized, especially on large projects. An alternative way to set up tests is to have all your files in one location and then a separate subfolder called tests and keep all your test files there. Advantages, disadvantages to both ways. On the project that I work on at work, we keep our end-to-end tests in like the browser automation tests in a separate test folder, and we keep our unit tests there with all of the other JavaScript files right up next to them, just with this .spec suffix. So I like that convention. Does anybody have any questions about that? No? All right. And we kind of see that, let's see what's going on here. I'll kind of go line by line. So we're in a node environment, so we can use things like module.exports and require. On line 1, we're just requiring only a single file, so we're bringing in the file that's on the left. So that's the syntax for that. On the left, we're exporting that function. So if you take line 1 on the right side, that is basically the same as saying var rock, paper, scissors equals, and then if you hop over to the left, function AB. Like you could do it that way, but here they are in separate files. On line 2, we're defining a variable expect and setting it to Chai's expect set of assertions, which again gives us the opportunity to write tests that read like English. I've got another example of this where I use should, which I think is maybe a little better for this setup. But yeah, especially because the strings that kind of describe the test are using should, but I'm still using like expect in the lines below it. So I can talk about that in a bit. So we have a describe block that wraps the entire suite of tests. And I've got .only because there are other files in this project that I'm not concerned with. Describe is just a function that Mocha makes available. Mocha is the JavaScript test framework. And it takes two arguments. The first is a string, and the second is an anonymous function to run. And you can nest these describe blocks as deep as you want. I generally think, though, that like 2 levels of nesting is the most you want to go. But by doing this, nesting, it keeps things really organized. You can see the output in the console, like the big parent rock, paper, scissors, and then the various children, which are a category of smoke tests, a category of, what are we going to do when there are ties, and what are we going to do when player A wins, what are we going to do when player B wins. So yeah, on line 5, we see another describe block, again, taking a string, an anonymous function. And these are smoke tests. So smoke tests are, I like to think like when there's smoke, there's fire. Like smoke tests just let you know that everything is wired up correctly. These are tests that are going to fail quickly. And they don't really like assert a lot. They just say that, hey, does this thing exist? And is this thing at least a function? And these are great places to start. They're really quick to write. And again, they just let you know that everything is wired up correctly. And then we have 3 describe blocks below that. Tie conditions, where I say that it should return tie if it's past rock and rock, or it should return tie if it's returned paper and paper, or it should return tie if it's past scissors and scissors. And then we see the next block of tests, which is rock beats scissors, paper beats rock, scissors beat paper. And we do the same thing in the final describe block of B winning, which is, paper beats rock, scissors beat paper, rock beats scissors. So I made a video on this on YouTube, and this is actually what Kevin saw, I think a couple weeks ago, and it interested him. And just a little bit of background. The idea of that video was for the month of July, I was going to do this thing where I just made a video a day of different web development things that I've been doing. So I think the first one was just setting up some initial browser automation, like end-to-end style tests on my blog. I did a couple of videos on some lame WordPress sites that I made. I was just trying to get stuff out there. And I made this one, and it turned out pretty well. So this idea of just getting content out there, I don't know, just making stuff and releasing it. So that was kind of my goal. And it was cool that somebody saw it, thought it was cool, and asked me to speak. So that was the preview. Let's talk a little bit about getting set up. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Not at all. All right. So it's really easy to set up. I'm not going to try to do this live because I'm not all that brave, and I don't know. It involves an npm install. So here we see just make a directory for the demo, go into that directory, npm install Mocha, so you get the test framework, and npm install Chai, so you get the assertion library. And that's really it. That's all you need to get started. If you don't have a package.json file, which is what Node uses, or npm, the package manager, uses to know what to install, you'll get some errors, but they're just warnings and you can ignore them. So that's what you would see if you were running those first 4 commands. If you wanted to have a package.json file, I've got that on the left. And in this dev dependencies, which is line 9, 10, 11, you can see that we list Chai as a dependency, Mocha as a dependency. It has, there's a category for dependencies, which is, stuff that your app would need to actually run. And dev dependencies are things that you need in your dev environment. So because Chai and Mocha are just for testing, you can put them in that dev dependencies block. So that's kind of what a package.json file would look like if you wanted to create that in your directory. And then you could just go npm install, and it would read the package.json file and download all that stuff, and put them in a node modules subfolder inside of your project. But if you're just running npm install Mocha, it'll do that way, and you'll get the error about there, not being a package.json file. So you might run into that. And then you would want to just stub out some files and directories. So those are kind of what those commands would look like, so that your target would be kind of here in the lower left-hand corner, or lower right-hand corner. So we've got the name of the project folder, the folder that's all of our dependencies that npm brings in. I have the file, like the test file, in a test subfolder. And that's really just because that's what Mocha defaults to. Like it looks for tests in a test subfolder. And you can change that. You can configure things to be whatever you want. But if you're looking for just minimal setup, just create a test subfolder and put your files in there. So the actual function itself is in the parent folder, and then the test for that is in a test subfolder. And again, I'm not a huge fan of that folder structure for unit tests, but if you're looking for zero setup, that's the way to do it. So Mocha by default looks for a directory called tests. This allows you to simply just run the Mocha command, and it's going to look for a folder called tests. And then there's another approach, which is to, again, the one that I kind of prefer, is to use a .spec file just right next to your module. So, and this is kind of what initial setup would look like. And as I said before, I used expect on that first demo. This one uses should, which is the other chai set of assertions that it makes available. So there's, chai.should, chai.expect, and chai.assert. I think assert is the least friendly one. It doesn't really read like English, but should is what I'm using here, and I used expect before. The thing about should is that when you call it and assign it to a variable, you have to have those parentheses there, like the open close parentheses. When you use expect, it does not require that. So if this was using expect, it would say var expect equals require chai.expect and then an immediate semicolon. And in this case, using should, you do it that way. And that's just because of I think the order that they come in. Like the should comes after the function that you call. So it's using probably something like this and going up and getting the function that it's attached to. So I also, when I initially did this, had it set up describing the algorithm challenge is returning the string A, returning the string B, and then returning the string tie. And then I kind of looked back on another example, and it was set up to return 1 if player A wins, -1 if player B wins, and 0 if it's a tie. And initially I was like, why is it doing that? I'm going to make it return strings. And then kind of thought about it a little bit more. And if you think about having a rock, paper, scissors function in the context of a game, a larger game that kept score, you would want to probably have it return a number like that. It's oh, that makes sense. So that's kind of how I changed it here. So moving on, this might be the end of the slides. All right, this is the end of the slides. So, all right. Any questions up to this point? Any? All right. Kevin, how am I doing on time? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Does anybody have any questions that they're potentially saving towards the end that maybe they'd want to ask now? Yes.
So where I work, a lot of the issues that we come up with when we come to unit testing a lot of our stuff, we have a lot of external variables. They're not functions that are easily testable.
Mm-hmm.
Something like this where it spits out a certain
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's, I guess, lots of testing, lots of like ways to test and things that can be tested. And I think of units as being the smallest possible like element of a code base. So like just a single function. If you're looking to test more, and even in that, like I work in an Angular code base, and we, like our unit testing, rarely is it just testing a single, very simple, pure function with only an input and an output. Often we have to do, we have to inject, dependencies that function has. We have to mock things out. We have to deal with, asynchronous behavior because of stuff that's going, wiring through other parts of the code. And if we're doing integration things that, involve browser automation against maybe a set of mock data or against maybe a database of other test data, those are different kinds of testing. So I think this is like an introduction, like showing the very, very simplest form of unit testing, which is like, I think testing a pure function where all you have to worry about is an input and an output. But for, testing APIs, you can use a tool like, Postman, that tool has some great like ways to automate tests. If it's a front-end web app, you can, do things to like automate that with WebDriver. Click on things, hit the database, get responses, show things in the UI, and then make assertions against that. Kevin has a great course on that. I'll plug that. I signed up for it and have done the first couple lessons. So it's a cool approach to like getting started with browser automation. So I checked that course out. Like I hadn't set a project up myself, like from the ground up doing browser automation. I just maintain a code base at work that has browser automation already set up. So setting up something from scratch is very different than maintaining something that's already in place. So does that kind of answer your question, or cool? Any other questions? Nado.
Probably know the answer to this, but whenever you were researching these kind of like this Pure as fair Mocha and Shy thing, did you kind of look into what different reporters are out of the box available for Mocha? Could you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah. They show some stuff in their docs. There are several different ones. I like this one where it shows, it's maybe more verbose, and when it fails, let me first sanity check. All right. When it fails, you get this really nice readout, like what was expected, what actually happened. So when he's talking about reporter, that's kind of like what, when it runs, like in your command line, like the visual part of what you see. And there are like browser-based versions of that. There are ones that just show a series of dots, and as long as they're passing, the dots are green, and if a test fails, like a single dot is red. I don't know, I like the visual feedback of this. I don't know, it's just kind of a warm fuzzy, like seeing all that readout there. There's another one I saw that has like this, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but the neon, like Nyan cat. Yeah, there's one of those like reporters. I think a guy that we work with, Jay, has like got a reporter that he's kind of like putting together. So. Do you know the name of this particular reporter?
I think that's Spec.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and it's like this really pretty readout that, you know.
If you do mocha space -- help, you might
dash dash.
help. And it might have something about reporters in there.
Whoops. Okay, so then what would I do then? Mocha dot?
Dash dash reporters equals, maybe? No, just a single equals, yeah. Might have that with those, no spaces. Yeah, like that. Reporters. Live code. Huh. Maybe no equals.
Say that again.
Is that some big file base or that just?
Reporter, single R, or gotta be dash dash. Reporter. No.
Oh,
And then,
try the equal?
equals, yeah. There we go.
Oh, wow.
That dude. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
NYA. I don't think it's.
oh, that's awesome. Today I learned. Wow, that's really neat.
I think with a cat, if you have enough, it'll actually.
So what happens when it fails? Yeah, what happens when it fails? Let's see. Oh, all right. So Nando's suggestion was to, let's see. And I think if they have the same title, like I don't know if it'll. Yeah. All right. Let's see.
I think neon means like meow.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, considering how we're doing on time and the fact that I'm not brave enough to like actually try and recreate some of this from scratch, so that is the rock, paper, scissors challenge. So there are a couple ways like this problem can be solved. And let me first sanity check and get back to a working state here. All right. So I kind of talked about this idea of like once your tests pass, and let me go back to like the initial. Here is a solution that is maybe not the most elegant. So we have our test harness kind of set up, and we see that all the tests pass. So maybe from here we say, all right, I want to make this read a little better. I want to find some other ways to solve this. Or I want to experiment with, well, what happens if I put, this block, down there, because maybe I think it's more readable or more performant. So you just can like start experimenting, and if you have tests, you see, you can have confidence in your refactoring process. So here's an approach that kind of has this weird conditional thing. It's readable. Now there is another way to solve this where you use the idea of a defeaters object. So let me first sanity check and make sure this passes. So at first glance, this is, I don't know, you'd think, why would you want to do this? But then I'll show you rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, and how this is extendable. So you save in this kind of lookup object called defeaters. you can think of it as like the thing that will beat rock is paper, and the thing that will beat paper is scissors, and the thing that will beat scissors is rock. And that language is from another version of this. So all right, so like if A is the defeater of B, then return A. If B is the defeater of A, return B. And then I put the tie like down at the bottom, but you could have the tie up at the top. You could refactor this any number of ways. So I think this is less readable. It's clever. But from here, you can go to this rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, and be able to extend it with this challenge that initially looks like way complicated. And you could set up like some sort of complicated truth table and do like, if player plays A and player B plays, or if, scissors and paper return scissors, and you could map all of these out. How many of these are there? There's a lot. Yeah, there's a much better way to do that. And let me see if I can, oh man. Kind of talk about this, and so I just like copy these over for writing the tests. I'll let this play. So copy these over, kind of showing like what the test would look like. So I've already got the ties set up. What's going on here? And it looks like my tie conditions pass. So then just copy those over, and you can just take your requirements, and here we'll just like turn the requirements into actual specs. So like comment them out. It's going to start working any moment now. Yeah, all right. So I'm like taking the requirements. And like basically the idea is like taking requirements and converting them into tests. And
So why would you do that all manually? Why would you write a script to do it automatically?
yeah, you could. All right, so that's what that process
The test is wrong. Like if
would look like.
if there's like a way like the table that you have, you shouldn't just be copying it into code. You should use it as a table, and then you can test it against the table. Because it's much more likely that you're going to introduce the error when you like copy paste it.
All right. Thanks for your patience.
Well, this algorithm is something that has, a very fixed number of inputs, but I'd imagine a lot of algorithms are going to be looking at have a huge number of different possible inputs, and you can only be testing against a small sample. I mean, because, like for this, if you're going to write a test, well, at that point, you might as well just, it seems like it's as much work as creating the function.
Yeah, no, I only heard a bit of that as I was, but often like writing your tests is harder or it takes more time than actually like implementing your code. I find that at work on a daily basis. Like I get, specifically with browser automation tests, like I get a feature working, and then like I got to write the test for it, and that can often take 2 or 3 times as long. But that investment that you make on the front end pays off many, many times because of the fact that you don't have to manual test once you have those things in place. So what you just saw on the video that I just played was like this process of converting requirements into tests. And as I said before, I was using .expect. Now I'm using .should. And let's run it. Great. Everything. Everything passes. So looking at what we had before, which was this defeaters object, which, I don't know, you may not want to use that for just a simple rock, paper, scissors, but if we do rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, then you can say, okay, well, there are two things that beat rock. There are two things that beat paper, two things that beat, and this could be written a lot more clear, but it's readable. Like, you know, if A is the first or second defeater of B, then return A. In this case, 1. If B is the first or second defeater of A, return B. In this case, -1. Otherwise, return tie. So that is a way that you could kind of use that like defeaters lookup object idea for this. So, and then there is I don't know, there's a lot of variations. I don't know what rock, paper, scissors, shotgun is. There is another one that is, oh God. I'm trying to think of, oh yeah. Ones that get way more complicated. What is this? Rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, Spider-Man, Batman, wizard, Glock. And you see like all of these, and it looks really complicated, but you could write unit tests for each of those. You could use this like defeaters idea, like it scales, you know? So something like this that, I don't know, to kind of tie it back together. You could write, you know, your test harness, like write your test for that, which would be really like translating these requirements into English. Get a function that just initially works, solves the problem, and then from there, because you have tests, you have the confidence to change it, to make it better, optimize it, and have the confidence to know that it will work. So, yeah. So we talked about Mocha, Chai. Kind of my ideas about learning to code, three-legged stool, algorithm challenges, which are a great way to think about pure functions, unit testing. Projects is a great way to like exercise, ideation and creativity, and like step-by-step tutorials is kind of like the third step of that. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions about unit testing or anything else? Cool. All right. Well, you guys have been a great audience. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you, Eric. And, check out his quick little YouTube video if you want a quick 5-minute overview. I really appreciated with it how it's just nice and quick and to the point, and it doesn't cover everything, but that's okay because you just want to get almost a refresher on the idea. Okay, so we've got this place until y'all leave. I think they do have a cleaning crew that comes in, but we've got a box of pizza left and drinks left if you want any. If you are going to be driving home, please don't drink a beer, cut yourself off because that would be bad. But you can have root beer. That's fine. So I think that's it. You're welcome to stick around. We may move to the back and play games. We may stay out here for conversation stuff. I'll get the lights back on in just a second. If you do want to do any presentations up here on anything, let me know. And